Welcome to In the Spotlight. I'm Abigail Pogrebin. Rabbi Joanna Samuels became CEO of the Marlene Meyerson JCC in Manhattan in January 2021. Before taking this enormous job, she was founding executive director of Educational Alliance's Manny Cantor Center, where her work was lauded and written about in the New York Times, the New York Daily News, and the Jewish Daily Forward. Joanna served as rabbi of Congregation Habonim in New York City, where her leadership helped to revitalize the synagogue's community. She also worked as advocate, strategist, and mentor for women's advancement and gender equity in the Jewish community at Advancing Women's Professionals. Joanna has written for local and national publications and taught at many institutions throughout New York City. She graduated magna cum laude from Barnard College and received rabbinic ordination from the Jewish Theological Seminary, where she was a Wexner Graduate Fellow. She serves on the advisory board of the West Side Campaign Against Hunger and lives on the Upper West Side with her husband and two children, who are alumni of the Saul and Carol Zabar Nursery School at the Manhattan JCC. Welcome, Joanna. I thank you for letting me call you by your first name, Rabbi Samuels. It's great to see you again. And full disclosure, Joanna has been in my book and other interviews I've done because I rely on her as a teacher as well as a leader. It's great to be with you. I just wanted to start with this huge job you have now taken on. We are talking, I think you're about 6 months, 7 months in. These were big shoes to fill. Rabbi Joy Levitt was leader for, I don't know how many years, 20 something, help me, 21, 22.
She was here for 20 years and she was the CEO for 16 years.
Right. Okay. And she is a formidable, wonderful, hilarious, amazing person and leader and force in the Jewish community, who I know we both love. But, you were hugely accomplished coming from what you were coming from. But this is a new kind of, I would say, I don't want to say burden or yoke, because that's too negative Jewishly, privilege, but portfolio. And just what was that like to inherit it?
It's been clear to me, actually, from the first day of this process of applying for this job, that the institution was so uniquely aligned, actually, that Joy retiring and feeling great about what would come next for her, the board feeling great and excited about what would come next, and the community also. That alignment is unique, and I am benefiting from it every day. Full disclosure, Joy happens to be my friend, whom I love very much for a long time. That helped our transition to be a time of candor and humor and honesty and real sharing. We continue to be very much in touch around all kinds of things. And between that transition and the enormous support of our board and the staff, that helps me to lead boldly and to really take on these reins with much more confidence than I think many people would have in something.
And
like
you started the job mid-pandemic, which is not the most favorite work conditions to begin, I'm sure. But just when you look ahead now at getting people to kind of come back live, which is, every synagogue and every shul's problem, every kind of institution that is dependent on gatherings, it's just almost like we lost the muscle. And sometimes we lost the habit, the routine, where we got comfortable in our pajamas. How are you approaching getting people back? How important is it to you? Because I know that the JCC excelled at remote virtual learning and engagement. Are you continuing that strand, that lane? But also, I know that you feel strongly that people come back. And I'd love you to explain why it's paramount for you.
Absolutely. Listen, I think at the most fundamental level, Jewish community is meant to be lived in person, and community is meant to be lived in person. It is wonderful to have Zoom and to be able to do things maybe more efficiently than we've done them in the past, and to be able maybe to access the kinds of things coming out of other places that we couldn't access before. But I take very, very seriously all of what we're noticing about the poor health outcomes of people being in their homes day after day, both their physical health, their mental health, their spiritual health. It affirms for me the need for us to be out in space with each other, being able to pick up on those social cues that can only take place in person, feeling like we're part of the energy of a space, of a room, of a concert. And so I am eager for people to come back. We are seeing people come back in very, very large numbers, which is heartening to us. And I do think we will continue to make available many of our things on Zoom because, of course, we have a national audience at this point that is relying on us. I still harbor hope that this period of time of pajamas and sofas and turning off the camera while you're snacking, I hope that time shrinks a little bit in our overall, in the overall time that we are spending.
I'm snacking on camera just for what it's worth.
And I'm wearing my pajamas. I'm not actually.
Before we leave the pandemic, it was clearly a financial strain for every institution. How is the JCC, when you look at those hurdles, beginning to strategize kind of the comeback in that respect, as much as you can share?
Yeah. Listen, JCCs were tailor-made to be hit hard by the pandemic, right? Because the financial model of a JCC is reliant in part on philanthropy and in part on in-person fee-for-service programming like fitness centers and nursery schools and day camps. And let's think about what it looked like to be running all of those things in the midst of a pandemic, which is to say many of them weren't running. And so we're seeing incredible enthusiasm and build back in all of those areas, particularly in our camp and in our pool and in our in-person classes and programs. And I think we are looking at our fitness center really, really closely over the next few months, because we're certainly seeing people come back to the gym, but it also may be that we're at a point where people's fitness habits have changed in some kind of ongoing way. And we need to be attentive to that because it's a really important part of our business model. The good news for the JCC is this is a very financially stable and healthy and well-run organization from both a professional and a board level. And so the issues for us are not existential ones, but they are issues we are absolutely looking at much more closely than in the past.
Let's just go to 10,000 feet and talk about why a JCC, why it matters so much, particularly in Manhattan, which is an intense place with so many cultural options, educational options, family connectivity options. Why is the JCC its own unique hub? Like, give us not necessarily the brochure, but really why you feel like just in your kishkas, and also just, again, as someone who is now leading this, why do you see how essential it is? How do you describe that to people?
So I think there are two reasons that are really motivating to me in doing this work. The first is that our institution can make people's lives easier, more meaningful, and more connected, no matter what stage of life they're in, with very, very few barriers for entry, right? And so if you're an older adult, if you're the parent of a new child, if you are a teenager, if you are a single person who might want to meet a significant other, we have just a slew of opportunities for people. And those opportunities we can just very generously offer without a lot of expectation in return. And it's a place where people come for happy, good, positive experiences, to learn, to become healthier, to connect with other people, right? And I think, like, in a world that feels like some days it feels like it's kind of melting down, I feel great about this vertical village that is just a hive of goodness and connection and learning and engagement and friendship. And I don't know I don't know that there's another place that is exactly like that, even as I know that there are so many incredible, meaningful institutions, both Jewish and non-Jewish, in this immediate neighborhood. I think the second reason for a Jewish community center is that in a moment, in a time of unbelievable partisanship, where we are like cutting our communities into tinier and tinier pieces so that everyone is aligned on every issue and we never have to be around someone with whom we disagree. This is an incredible social experiment, actually, for how Jews, non-Jews, people of different backgrounds, different beliefs, different political ideas can be in space together to think about, who are we? What is our neighborhood? What do we need? What is our community? And how can those different ideas both open each one of us up to a kind of curiosity that we can tap into, and also, I believe strongly, to a much more effective solution set, right? Because if I'm sitting in my room with the 10 people who think exactly like me, my own little private minyan, I'm not getting a lot of input that's helping me to think about the complexities of this world.
And we're seeing, it's not just American division, it's Jewish division, where just in our own family, proverbial and sometimes literal at the Seder table, we are unable to talk about certain subjects without either yelling at each other or canceling each other. I guess I just want to drill down a little bit more, not so much in the Pollyannish way of like, we'll all come together, of just how does an institution like the JCC, which I'm obviously biased about because I'm lucky enough to have an interview series there. You know, what I see, for instance, on Shavuot, when it used to be 3,000 people, I understand last year, even in the post sort of mid-pandemic, it was 1,500, but 3,000 very different Jews showing up for one night of learning for like 8 hours of straight, incredible programming. And it was a snapshot for me personally of how kind of what the world could look like. You know, however you pray, whatever you believe or don't believe, however we disagree on Israel, we're all studying Torah together. We're all learning a folk dance together. We're all learning how to bake challah, whatever the experience is, or frankly, talking about Zionism. And, you know, the programming is so diverse, but we're in the same room and we've gathered and we're all eating cheesecake. And those things, those commonalities are in a way evident without announcing them. So I guess, is that what you're talking about, that the programming in a way melts the divisions because we're just in the same room? We've gathered for this conversation or this activity?
I would say for sure that's the case. And I want to also just say that in itself, I feel like Dayenu, right? Mm-hmm. There are very few settings in the Jewish community in this city with all of our resources and all of the ways in which we can differentiate ourselves into the micro communities in which we feel most comfortable. There are very few settings that have that kind of rich, diverse depth of something like the tikkun. I did not try the folk dancing. I was a little bit like—
too hard. It is so hard.
Like I was not going to show up well in the folk dancing. So I went
with you. I think that should have sailed for us.
But I would say the other thing I would say is, and we will be doing a lot of this in the coming year, is orchestrating very consciously conversations that model how to encounter difference with humanity and with respect, right? Because actually, that's the most important thing we can do right now in terms of social responsibility and in terms of the preservation of democracy. Two things, by the way, that are enormously important to the health of any Jewish community, right? Jewish communities do well in democracies. We do not do well in other kinds of political models, right? And so we will be creating over the course of the next months opportunities for people to both hear from opposing viewpoints in a respectful way and also be trained in how to navigate those kinds of conversations ourselves. I had a very powerful experience prior to beginning my tenure at the JCC, which was to participate in a fellowship designed to create better arguments in the world. And there were 15 of us fellows from around the country. And the idea was to learn how to be in constructive, respectful, and humane disagreement about issues that I can assure you I'm very, very passionate about. But it enabled me to see a way forward in this moment to think, okay, if we are going to live in a country where, or in a city or in a community where there is a diversity of opinion, and I feel strongly about my opinions, I have a few choices. Choice one is I can only associate with people like myself. Choice two is I can choose to feel anger or upset at someone else for having a different viewpoint. The third, and in my mind, the best viewpoint, is if I take winning off the table, if I take convincing that person off the table, how can that help me see their humanity across our difference? And what I imagine for our community right now, and what we are putting into place for our community, is the apparatus by which we can do that more effectively, so that we are all ambassadors, not just for particular viewpoints that we might hold, but ambassadors for each other's humanity.
But let me ask you, Joanna, because I know you're not someone who's been shy about the things you believe in, and it's something I've admired about you for a long time. And now you're in an institutional role. You kind of have you have an institutional profile. Is that in some way hindering as to your just what you think or your perspective or your kind of rabbinic voice? And whether it comes to something like Roe v. Wade being overturned or the two-state solution or criticism of Ilhan Omar, do you feel like you have to kind of either quiet or, and I'm not saying you've spoken on those subjects in the past publicly, but I am sure you have opinions on those subjects. And is this a role in which you have to kind of quiet your own bias or your own feelings, do you think?
So I think the question I always have is, in any role that I'm in, given where I'm in, what is the most effective way for me to be operating? In a moment like this, when something happens in the world and every Jewish organization is putting out a statement and putting out the thing and putting on Facebook and actually, I don't know what we're solving for in that moment. I don't think we're solving the issue. I don't think we're moving ourselves forward. And I certainly don't think I am convincing anyone who might disagree with me about why.
Oh, I suddenly see the light.
Right. Oh, thank you so much, Joanna Samuels, for that statement. Now I really understand about Israeli politics, right? Like, that is probably never how the human mind works. And it is absolutely not how we are taking in information right now. It is absolutely not how we are changing minds. Instead, what we're doing is we're circling our own wagons and fortifying our own positions. So I would say, do I feel like I am hindered from speaking out? Not at all. It's just that I don't think speaking in that way has any effectiveness in this moment. Like, I think that the prophetic age is taking a pause right now. And this is the relational age. And so rather than putting something on Facebook or on our, like, whatever about something, I would love to think about, like, Abby, if there were something you and I disagreed about, which probably there isn't actually, but like, how would we
find something?
Yeah, we'll find something. I was going to say Zabar's or H&H, but that's like already an old reference.
Right. Pro-gefilte fish, anti.
But like, how could you and I get up on stage in our beautiful auditorium and talk about that difference? And I could say, Abby, help me understand how you arrived at that. And you could say, here's how. And Joanna, like, actually, I really disagree with that, but I'm curious about how you came to that conclusion. And I think it's within that kind of communication that we are leading in this moment. It's not, I feel this way about the issue.
The fact that there has been this spike in anti-Semitism, which is well documented and obviously has been discussed quite a bit by every Jewish institution and in many Jewish homes, how do you see your role, the JCC's role, in kind of responding to that moment, and particularly looking at young people? I know it's a generalization, but 20s or 30s who are perhaps at least some of these polls or surveys say are kind of quieting their Jewish identity, not necessarily denying it, but not advertising it, not choosing to kind of be as publicly Jewish as they might have been because of the blowback, the pushback.
Yeah. So it makes me think about what are the conditions, and I alluded to this earlier, in which Jewish communities are healthiest. And Jewish communities are healthiest in democracies where there's diversity of opinion and where people can disagree with each other. Many of the settings in which young people are finding themselves, like some college campuses, are places where the loud voices on both poles are really driving the environment and the conversation. So I think two things. I think the first thing is that Jewish identity starts in our earliest moments and in our earliest memories. And that anti-Semitism is probably not a motivator for Jewish pride. Jewish practice, Jewish community is the motivator for Jewish pride. And so I hope and pray that's what we're doing here, in being so proudly and so actively driving Jewish community celebration and learning. And that I also hope that we are providing people with a sense of safety, a sense of companionship, and a sense of community in a time when it can feel frightening to be out there.
Why did you take this job? Like at the point that you were at in your career and just your sort of Jewish journey, why did it speak to you? What drew you to it?
Well, I was joking initially and saying that I was really tired of taking the subway to the Lower East Side for 9 years and wanted to walk to work, but that's not actually why. So my career has really been the result of so many fortuitous developments. So I was the rabbi at Havonim when I first graduated from rabbinical school, and I loved that work so much.
Tell our viewers what that is. People might know.
Havonim is a synagogue. It used to be on 66th Street. Now it's on West End in the lower 60s. It was founded by refugees from Germany in the late 30s. And the first Shabbat service ever at Havonim was on the first anniversary of Kristallnacht, November 9th, 1939. And so the opportunity to work in that synagogue, which is a neighborhood synagogue, a wonderful place, and a place that at that time was still populated and driven by these incredible refugees and survivors and their children, is one of the great privileges of my entire life, and grounded me in a kind of the way that Jewish culture, Jewish history, Jewish trauma, Jewish celebration all intersect to create the richness that Jewish life gives us. And following that, I felt like I wanted to do something in New York City that was dealing with the issues of inequity and diversity, and was really lucky enough to have the opportunity to open up a brand new community center in Manhattan on the Lower East Side called the Manny Cantor Center, which was the adventure of a lifetime and something I feel really proud of and really grateful to have done and worked within the city agencies and work with a very diverse population. And then at a certain point, I felt like I miss the Jewish community. Like I really, in my core, I wake up thinking and dreaming and worrying about our community and how we can live lives of relevance and spirituality and presence as Jews. And so fast forward, and here I am, and I couldn't be happier or feel luckier to be sitting in this seat.
So I'd love to just finish. When you look at what is particularly daunting right now, if you could answer very briefly, and what is particularly thrilling?
I think something that's daunting is that, and maybe it's always the case, but we don't actually know what's coming down the pike, right? Like, I feel like just in terms of like our Dalit Amot, our immediate area, our institution has always depended on certain things happening, certain people joining, certain people enrolling in our schools, et cetera. And that's what makes this place the place that it is. And the last 2.5 years have brought about enormous changes in behavior that mean that we have to think about a whole bunch of other things. And it turns out there's no like smart person who's going to walk into the room and be like, actually, here's the thing you want to be doing. And I have spoken to political leaders, business people, futurists, and everyone is sort of like, we don't know, right? So that feels daunting, sitting in the seat of leading an institution. And like, it's also going to be a time of unbelievable creativity and innovation. And we're going to try things that like succeed beyond our wildest beliefs, and like other things that we're going to be like, oh, that was a dumb idea. And I guess I feel like that's an amazing opportunity to be able to do that in such an important institution for the Jewish people in this neighborhood, in this city, which is my home and which I love so much. Just feels like an amazing, amazing opportunity moving forward.
Thank you, Rabbi Joanna Samuels. Congratulations again on this incredible, daunting, but yes, thrilling task and job description. And you are the person to lead us forward. I'm very excited to be seeing what you do and how maybe you can heal us all. How about that?
Together.
Thank you all for being part again of this wonderful conversation in the Spotlight. It's always great to have you, and I look forward to seeing you next time. I'm Abigail Pogrebin.